As one looks over the oldest civilization in India, it is being said that this country has been the part of one of those oldest civilizations, and that is which started from the late 6500 BC. From part of those 500,000 years ago, there had been many of those attackers who actually visited to make their own ruling place, but India and its religions always managed to get through such problems, thus making India an independent country now. So basically, this can be said that India has always been in that category of too much powerful and complicated to get ruled by any other ruler for so much long. Also, as we look over those archaeological reports, it is being said that India can actually be divided into 5 different phases of time, which includes Saraswati civilization, also known as Harappan evolution or Vedic period, that is believed to be lasted from 6500 BC to 1000 BC. After that comes Golden Period in history of India, lasted from 500 BC to 800 AD. Moving along, which comes Muslim influence towards India dated from 1000 AD to 1700 AD. And then comes British rule in India from the date of 1700 AD to 1947. After which comes modern India that one look over for till now. Ancient India. Here is what led to the beginning of something new to be happened in the history of world, and that was what you know by the name of beginning of civilization around the date of 6500 BC, whose evidence was first noticed in Meharkar. Also, it is being said that this evidence was actually one of the earliest evidence which tells about the world's earliest human sanctuary. Meharkar was considered as the earliest and one of those largest urban locations of that period, where there was also found the evidence to domestic life, beginning of agriculture and also arts and crafts. There was the continuous process of development in domestication, agriculture, and also began, which brought up the use of barley, wheat, rice and metal too, following which the huge development that was being noticed in many of those villages and towns. It is believed that people at that time of the era were as basic and ethnic as one can look over in India today, and also having those basic types of languages, making it not too much complicated or anything. This time of the era is also considered as the Vedic period, which is actually named after that Indo-Aryan culture which was considered as the part of northwest India, where other parts of India were actually following some different cultures during that period of time. In any case, if you wish to know about the Vedic culture, then head on to the Vedas, which has every single detail about the same and also is considered as holy by Hindus, that is specifically written in Vedic Sanskrit. There are many of those historians according to which it is analysed that Vedas wanted a Vedic culture to become the part of Punjab and also to those upper plains of Ganges. Along with that, it is also measured that this period have actually comprehended those number of waves which includes the migration of Indo-Aryan into the area of subcontinent from northwest. Moving along, by the time Atharva Veda came into existence, the people, tree and cow were considered as the holy ones, which are actually meant to be prayed and respected. There were those many number of concepts related to Indian philosophy which adopted their roots into Vedas, later with time such as Dharma, Karma, etc. Primary society of Vedas is actually defined in the Rig Veda. In the Rig Veda, which is considered as one of the oldest Vedic texts and is believed to have been combined and accumulated during the time period of 2nd millennium BCE in some northwestern area of the Indian subcontinent. Also, by this time of the period, there were those large number of tribal and pastoral groups maintained in the Aryan society, which was entirely different from the Harappan development that had already been abandoned. Also, this primary Indo-Aryan occurrence probably links to the ochre-coloured pottery nation, though it was actually in pretty small regions. By the time Rig-Vedic period came to an end, the Aryan society began its roots to get expanded from that part of northwestern region of Indian subcontinent to the Ganges plain in west direction. Now, This expansion here made it possible for that society to become progressively agricultural and also organized in respects of social culture, and that too around the grading of the four varnas, or which you can also call as social classes. Now, this social structure there was actually categorized not only by syncretizing with many of those instinctive cultures that were already the part of north part of India, but also ultimately by the process of eliminating those ethnic group of people by considering them as people with impure livelihood. Also, this was the period when many of those earlier small ethnic components and chiefdoms took a step forward to combine into many of those monarchical and state-level organizations. There were those two cities discovered at the time of diggings in 1920 in the area of Indian subcontinent, among which one was Harappa on the sides of Ravi River and another one was Mohenjo-daro at Indus site, which were actually the part of large civilization, now known to people by the name of Indus Valley Civilization or Saraswati Civilization. During the time period of 3100 to 1900 BC, there was that huge rise in the field of agriculture, art and craft, and also many more under that time of Harappan civilization. Also during this period of time, there were many of those buildings which were constructed by keeping in mind number of tactics that was not in any way less than modern cities planning. Two of these cities were actually planned really well, keeping in mind those all of the conveniences which can be in need to people so as to make their living easier and good for them. Not only these, but there are also many other cities which are being the part of the Indus Valley civilization, named as Kalibangan, Lothal, Harappa, Mohenjo-daro and Mehrgarh, which were having within those 500 cities along the sides of river, awaiting over to get combined with each other. During this era of Vedic period, there was also a time when Iron Age kingdom was brought up into power somewhere near to 1200 BCE, also described by the rise of Janapadas, which is considered as empires, republics and kingdoms, that is those rulings of Kuru, Panchala, Kosala and Videha. Among all of the well-known kingdoms, Kuru kingdom was the one which is considered as that very first state-level civilization of the time when Vedic period was being in action, and that too at the time when Iron Age was introduced somewhere in the region of northwestern India around that time period of 1200 to 800 BCE. While being in action, this Kuru kingdom also managed to unify the Vedic chants into gatherings that lead to the development of traditional Shrauta ritual to help in sustaining the social order. Huge transformation could be seen in the northern part of Iron Age India that actually made this realm to get transformed into the very well-known political and cultural power, behind which were the two major figures of that ruling period, named as King Parikshit, following his successor named as Janamejaya. Now, as this period of Kuru kingdom began to get weakened up, Vedic culture got their focus shifted over to their neighbours from the east, and that were known by the name of Panchala kingdom. There were also that grey ware culture painted and brought in light by the art of archaeology, which managed to get thrived into the regions of Haryana and western Uttar Pradesh from north side of India at around the time of 1100 to 600 BCE, and also is believed to resemble to the above-mentioned kingdoms, that is Kuru and Panchala. After this, during the period of Vedas, the new and next focus of Vedic culture was Videha kingdom, which nowadays is known by the name of Nepal and Bihar, the two well-known states of India where King Janaka was being the major source of importance, as it was his court that provided that huge support to the Brahmin advisors and also the logicians such as Yajnavalkya and Aruni. This period, being into the advanced part, resembles with an association of progressively major states and kingdoms also known by the name of Mahajanpadas all over the northern part of India. Golden period of India. With the time passing by, there was those large number of changes taking place in the history of India, and which also included the introduction of Buddhism and Jainism, the major reason behind which was the Shramana movement, when Upanishads were written for the very first time. After the time of 500 BCE, there was that new second urbanization which made a quick start, with many of those expenditures taking a rise at Ganges plain. Also, during the time of late Vedic period, there were many of those other kingdoms and empires which had their control maintained on the subcontinent, as mentioned in many of the Vedic, Jaina and Buddhist cultures, among which were Kashi, Anga, Kosala, Magadha, Vaji, or which is also known as Vriji, Chedi, Mala, Vatsa, also known as Vamsa, Panchala, Kuru, Matsya or Matcha, Asaka, Shurasena, Avanti, Gandhara and Cambodia. Whether part of whole of the ruling system, this rise was also being considered as that second major ruling experienced by the same period after Indus Valley civilization. There are many of those minor tribes which are stated in the reports of initial literature that are believed to be there through whole of the rest part of the subcontinent. Among these many of the empires, there were some of the kings which were inherited, and while many of those chose to nominate their rulers. Many of those initial republics, such as the one named as Vaiti, also known as Vriji, association was fixed to the city of Vaishali, that developed at the time of early 6th century BCE and continued to be ruling in many of those areas until the time of 4th century CE. Most of the educated and cultured speech at that period of time was considered as Sanskrit, and while, on the other hand, languages in northern part of India was Prakrits, that was used by most of the general population in there. Now, as the time approached by, most of these 16 empires got merged to become the 4 major parts by the time of 500 or 400 BCE, and that too during the period of Gautama Buddha, named as Vatsa, Avanti, Kosala and Magadha. Also, it is believed that major part of life of Gautama Buddha was at most related with these 4 kingdoms only, making it being counted as the most important part of their life. After this, there was that huge configuration of Upanishads witnessed around the time period of 800 to 400 BCE, which are considered as the abstract base for the development and main tenets of traditional Hinduism and are known by the name of Vedanta, which is said to be the assumption of the Vedas. There was a time when these Upanishads also brought over an issue to launch attacks so as to increase the strength on that same ritual and religion, and the one who was seen worshipping some religion which is other than the self was considered as some domestic animal of gods in the reports of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. On the other hand, Mundaka launched one of those most sarcastic attacks on the customary by relating people who raid sacrifice with some insecure kind of boat, which was limitlessly surpassed by old age and death. This continuous rate of growth in the urbanization of India during the time period of 7th and 6th centuries BCE brought a huge growth to new ascetic or Shramana movements that came up to challenge the tradition of rituals, major icons behind which were Mahavira, the supporter of Jainism, and Gautama Buddha, the founder of Buddhism. This movement of Shramana also came up with the concept of the cycle of birth and death, samsara, and the idea of freedom. During this very time, there was also that religion of Jainism spreaded by Mahavira to the whole of the world out there. Maurya Empire. Now, as the time passed by, there was that new rise seen in the form of Maurya Empire during the time of 322 to 185 BCE, which is considered as that solo and very first empire throughout which made India get united into one state, also being the largest on the Indian subcontinent. This was empire which made its roots get extended to many of those parts, getting over to the upper north towards the boundaries of Himalayas and moving along towards the east, where nowadays one can find Assam emerging. Also, it extended towards the west, passing over all of the boundaries of Pakistan to the area where one can now look for Afghanistan. The major hand behind the establishment of this empire was Chandragupta Maurya, with the assistance by Chanakya in the area of Magadha, where one can nowadays find modern Bihar emerging its roots. After Chandragupta, it was his son Bindusara who took hold of the powers and thus made them more grow all over the area, which was made possible by the time he died in 272 BCE. There was a large part of subcontinent that could be seen under Maurya Empire. Now, as the time was moving by, Bindusara also got defeated by Ashoka in 272 BCE, whose rule then lasted for around 37 long years, that is until the date of his death, which is 232 BCE. Ashoka, during his time of ruling, came up with a movement that was in contradiction of the Kalingans at around 260 BCE, which turned out to be effective and thus led to that great amount of loss in terms of life and misery. After this movement, Ashoka was though not so happy, and so which made him to avoid violence and thus also made him to embrace Buddhism. And soon after his death, there was not so much of growth in his empire, as the very last Mauryan ruler, named as Brihadratha, was murdered by Pushyamitra Shunga, so as to begin with the Shunga Empire. Kushan Dynasty. Soon after the Mauryan Empire came to an end, during the time of 2nd century, there was that huge mixture of regional powers that could be seen in the part of South Asia. Also, the northwestern part of India could be seen getting more of the attackers at the time 200 and 300 BC. While this period of time, there also could be seen those various numbers of achievements in terms of arts and management, which was at the most believed to be encouraged by syncretism and cultural diffusion. On the other side, there was that growth of numismatics that was noticed by those in Indo-Greek, or which can also be called upon as Bactrians, of northwest direction. They were tracked by another group, which were at that time known to be called as the Shakas, or Scythians, who belonged to the plains of Central Asia and were by that time seen to be de-established in western parts of India. Though this rule didn't last for so much long, as these Shakas were driven out of that part of India by other nomadic people who were known as Yuezhi, basically who were believed to be forced out of some inner Asian plains of Mongolia, and thus it led to the establishment of the Kushana kingdom that lasted since 1st century BC to the 3rd century AD. This empire, settled up by Kushana, used to control various parts of Afghanistan and Iran, and whereas in India this empire of Kushana got expanded from the various other parts of different countries, such as Purushapura, now known as modern Peshawar in Pakistan, from the direction of northwest towards Varanasi in the east, and also following Sanchi, Madhya Pradesh, towards the south direction. One of the well-known Kushana ruler at that time was considered as Kanishka, who was believed to be ruling this country for 2 long decades, starting around AD 78. He was also the one who got transformed to Buddhism, and it made him organize the excessive Buddhist council in many of the parts of Kashmir. It is believed that the age of Guptas was actually introduced by this Kushan period only. Classical period of India. Now is the part where most of the Indian subcontinent got reunified under the Gupta Empire, and that is why it is known as Classical period. Also, this is the reason that this period of time is considered as the golden period for India. There were many of those scholars produced during this period of time, such as Kalidasa, Aryabhata, Vishnu, Sharma, and many more who managed to achieve great achievements in different fields. This period of Guptas actually brought out to be the turning point for Indian culture, as there were many of those sacrifices that were noticed to be made by them. Among all of the rulers, the very first three, that is Chandragupta first, Samudragupta and Chandragupta second, made it possible through their military conflicts to get maximum of India under their ruling and leadership. Getting into the depths of same, it can be noticed that under the ruling of Chandragupta first, most of the empire was covered towards the north direction. As same as Chandragupta Maurya, he first worked upon winning Magadha and got his empire settled up at the same place where Mauryan capital could be seen standing, i.e. Patna, and used this place to get the kingdom extended towards the eastern portion of North India. After him, it was his son, named as Samudragupta, and also his grandson, known by the name of Chandragupta II, who worked upon getting the empire extended over whole of the area at north and western Deccan. It has also been said that Chandragupta II was extreme of all of the Gupta kings and was known by the name of Vikramaditya. However, moving along during the time of 480 AD, dynasty of Guptas got conquered by the Huns and thus took over their control on the northern part of India. Now, as the time passed by, Huns gradually started assimilating into the native population, and thus which led to get their state weakened up. As India was every day getting into someone's new hands to get ruled over, and so after Guptas and then Huns lost their control over it, there was one another emperor named as Prabhaka Vardhana, belonging to the family of Pushabhakti and used to rule over Thanisa, began to extend his power towards all of those other nations. He was actually considered as the first ever king of Vardhana Empire, with Thanisa being the capital, which is now a small town in the city of Kurukshetra in Haryana state. And as he died in 606 AD, his son named as Rajavardhan took a control over an empire and thus ended up becoming a king of Kananuj, though not for so much long, as he got killed in a battle which was fought against Maurya king Devigupta and Gauda king Sasanka. Soon after this, Harsha, at the age of 16, took hold of the control over an empire and made it get established during the time period of 606 to 647 AD. This person ruled over northern India and thus made it get well established. Harsha is actually considered as one of the greatest defeaters and also one of the vivid supervisors in terms of Indian history. During his time of ruling, he also managed to make his capital city get extended to the long miles, which is basically the example of how good he was doing with his ruling. Looking forward to the taxes, it is believed that only the fourth of his taxes were for the administration and rest were just meant for the betterment of his empire, such as art, culture and many more, which as a result led to achieve so many achievements in different cultures. As soon as Harshavardhana died, the kingdom of Kanauj became totally undefined, and that too by the time of 730 AD, when a ruler named Yashovarman started ruling over the dynasty till the date of 752 AD, which was then tracked by Ayutthaya Empire that was actually said to be maintained by three kings. This time of ruling is also being counted as the one in late classical period. Period of India under Muslims. Now, this period in here is also been counted as the one which people can call as the medieval period or early modern period, as was majorly known due to the Muslim existence in India, where many of the Muslim nomadic bands entered into natural Indian elites which made Rajput to resist Muslim conquests and thus brought up with three different cultures and dynasties of Hindu, Muslim and Sikh, bringing over those many of the new military knowledge and techniques. Among many of those reasons of Muslim overthrow, the very major reason was spreading up of Islam. It is also been said that before approaching towards India, Muslim community already started ruling Kabul, the Punjab and Sindh. It is assumed that the biggest reason behind this attraction of Muslim towards India is wealth, and thus they got their way when some inter-rivalry was being noticed between those different territories in India. Looking over the history, it is been said that the very first attack by Muslim community on India took place in Sindh during the year of 715 AD, and that too by Arabs, which were led by Muhammad bin Qasim, and thus which led to the result of getting Raja Daher, ruler of Sindh that time, to get displaced from his very own capital, Defo, which is now modern Karachi. They also tried once to attack Malwa, which resulted out to be unsuccessful at the end. After this attack, which was only restricted to the region of Sindh for a time period of approximately 300 years, Muslims still tried for many of the attacks to make their ruling get spreaded, but it was a complete failure due to the defeat from kings like Rajab Khoja and also other Gurjara kings. And following this, the next attack was brought in action by Turk Sabuktagin, who resulted into getting himself established in Khorasan and get his empire stretched out to the area of Kabul and Ghazni. Moving along, during the time of 986 AD, he came up with a battle to Raja Jaipal of Bathinda, soon after which during the year of 999 AD. Raja Jaipal got associated with another king from Hindu community, which included Rajapala, the Prathira king of Kanauj, and also Tanga, who has been known by his ruling on Chandela kingdom, but then they also ended up getting defeated. Now the oldest son of Sabuktagin, named as Mahmud of Ghazni, expected to get into the power in 997 AD. He was believed to be very much aware of whole of the wealth that he could attain by making many of the attacks happen in India, along with which he was the religious fanatic who always looked forward to find a way which can get Islam spreaded all over the India. Mahmud, while being in power, is said to have attacked India for at least 17 times between the period of 1001 and 1027 AD. Though there were many of those kings from different empires who tried hard to resist Mahmud, but no one really ended up getting succeeded, such as King Jaipal and also his son Anandpal. There are many of those empires whom he managed to defeat, such as between the time period of 1009 AD and 1026 AD. He is believed to attack and defeat Kangra, Khanshwa, Mathura, Kanauj, Kashmir, Gwalior and Punjab. And then moving along to the year of 1025 AD, Mahmud attacked Somnath and thus robbed its temple, which was situated on the coast of Saurashtra or Kathiawar. Huge amount of treasure from that temple was burglared. The attack in 1027 AD is believed to be his last attack, soon after which he expired at the time of 1030 AD. The very next name in the list of important Muslim rulers, that is the one who made their effect in reports of Indian history, is known by the name of Muhammad Ghori. He is said to attack India 7 times. In 1175 to 76 AD, he attacked Multan, and then following to that, in 1178 AD, he also endeavoured the defeat of Gujarat. Himdev II managed to resist him by causing a severe downfall on him. He got to meet Prithviraj Chauhan during the first battle of Tarain in the time of 1191 AD, which left him in very bad condition with really severe wounds, which made him to end up getting defeated and thus leave the battlefield. Moving along, in the year of 1192 AD, both of the armies again get to meet each other at Tarain, and thus Muhammad this time finally managed to defeat Prithviraj Chauhan. After which, in 1194 AD, he overpowered and killed the leader of Kanauj Jaichand, soon after which he also managed to occupy Gwalior, Gujarat and Ajmer by 1197 AD, and then expired in 1206 AD. Slave Empire. Qutb-ud-Din Aibak, the slave from Turkestan, was relieved by Muhammad Ghori, whose general and leader, named as Muhammad Khilji, successfully robbed and occupied the fort in Bihar at the time of 1193 AD, and then during the time period of 1199 to 1202 AD, Muhammad Khilji managed to bring Bengal under his authority. On the other side, Qutabuddin managed to make a new foundation, a new dynasty, which was named as the Slave Dynasty in 1206 AD and then died in 1210 AD, after which his son-in-law Iltutmish took over whole the power in 1211 AD. Most of his days were spent on having all of those lost regions which were somehow lost by Qutabuddin, and along with that also added up Malwa and Sind to the list. He also managed to get Rajput leaders of Ranthambore, Ajmer, Nagaur, Jalore, Gwalior get defeated and thus lose their powers. Similar to that, there were many of those rulers like Raiza Begum, Nasiruddin Mahmud and Balban who took over the power and ruled over the country. Hilji Empire. Now, as Balban rested on the bed of death, it led the Sultanate to get weak, and which also brought in action many of the revolts, so this was actually the period which brought Jalaluddin Khilji to get into the ruling, which marked the establishment of Khilji Empire during the time of 1290 AD. It was his nephew Alauddin Khilji who made up a conspiracy to kill Jalaluddin Khilji, and thus, after getting his plan into action, he finally declared himself as an emperor in 1296. After coming into action, there are many of the attacks that he performed to conquer various nations of India, and thus by the time of 1311 AD, he got whole of the North India captured within its power. And on the other side, his general Malik Kafur managed to capture that large area of southern India. Also, as Alauddin Khilji was in rule, India got to suffer many of the attacks from the empire of Mongols, but which totally turned out to be unsuccessful, to make him learn a lesson to be prepared for any future occurrence and thus get his armed forces organized. As Alauddin Khilji expired in 1316 AD, his third son was given a power to rule and manage the country, who was murdered by Khursu Khan, and which brought an end to Khilji dynasty. Shah and Sur dynasty. Along with this, there were many of the dynasties which came into power and left, such as Tughlaq dynasty, Lodhi dynasty, Mughal dynasty, and also the Shah and Sur dynasty, which is believed to last only for 5 years but has that unique landmark in the history of subcontinent of India. Shah was considered as one of the most capable armies and also the civilian managers. There were many of those improvements noticed in the time of his ruling, especially in terms of army and revenue management. Also, there were many of those civil works that were brought in action during his short period of ruling. Then, as soon as he died in 1545, his son, named as Islam Shah, came into action and ruled since 1553 AD, after which Muhammad Adil Shah came to rule. However, Muhammad Adil was not that capable to take the responsibility of becoming a good leader, and so his minister Hemu became that important part of empire and thus controlled whole of the kingdom. Modern India and independence. Well, now after so much of struggle, India was still not done with this ruling system, and which brought Britishers to get into power and rule over the country. Though there were not really that big number of British people in India earlier, but still they made it possible to have control over 2/3 of subcontinent. But this time, India was not really ready for having this done all over again by another country, and so they decided to fight back, fight for their independence, and thus make their country get a freedom which they always longed for. And this is what is counted as one of those most important events known by the name of Rise of Indian Nationalism, where Indians decided to fight for their own rights and their own rulings. The very first step which was taken by them towards this fight of independence was to get appointment of councillors, so that which can make it easy to guide the British Viceroy in 1861, and after making many of the efforts, they finally got a chance in 1909, with first Indian being appointed there. Also, there were many of the regional meetings where Indian were being included time to time, and on the other side contribution of councillors was consequently getting broadened up towards the legislative councils. Also, an army, a British Indian army, was constructed with British people being senior officers and the troops being selected as people from many of those small marginal groups, such as Gurkhas from Nepal and also the Sikhs. Along with that, there was an Indian nationalist leader named as Bal Gangadhar Tilak, who stated Swaraj, self-rule, as the purpose of any other country. There was this widespread sentence by him which said, "Swaraj is my birthright, and I shall have it," and thus this became that very important cause of motivation for every other Indian. Soon after some time, he got to find some new support to his work by making two other leaders rise up, which were named as Bipin Chandra Pal and Lala Lajpat Rai, with that same point of view as Tilak. On the other hand of project, many of those moderates, which were led by the leaders named as Dadabhai Nauroji and Gopal Krishna Gokhale, wanted to see the improvement done within the agenda of British rule. Also, the British people, on the other hand, decided to implement a technique of carrot and stick, and thus stood up to support India and also their nationalist demands during the time of First World War. From the time of 1920 onwards, there were many other leaders which came into light, such as Mahatma Gandhi, and became highly popular because of many of those mass movements that were brought into action against British Raj, while working with many of those peaceful approaches. Along with that, there were many of the approaches that were made by Gandhiji, such as beginning of independence movement, which was actually the opposing action for British rule, and that too using non-violent method, with movements like non-cooperation, civil disobedience and economic resistance. Revolutionary activities like these took place all through the British rule in the part of Indian subcontinent, and also, on the other side, there were some of the people making the aggressive attitude, like Indian National Army, that was actually being planned to get British rule overthrown by armed struggle itself. Now, moving over to the time of Second World War, which lasted from 1939 to 1945, India by this time was being organised by United Kingdom, where British people were the one holding regions in India, which also comprised of 500 independent princely states. There was a war declared in Germany by the British Army, for the preparation of which British Raj, being a part of the similar nations, forwarded around 2.5 million number of helper soldiers so as to help them fighting under British command in contradiction of Axis rules. On the other side, the movement called Indian National Congress, which was brought in action by Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi and Maulana Azad, criticised Nazi Germany but decided not to attack them or anyone other by the date India gets its independence. After some time in August 1942, another movement was launched by Congress named as Quit India Movement, according to which there would be not any kind of cooperation with the government by the date freedom was approved. Though the government was ready for this, and so as a result of which they decided to arrest around 60,000 nationals and also the local leaders of Congress, and then took a step forward to overpower the fierce response of supporters of Congress. There were many of the main leaders of this movement who were kept behind the bars by British community by the date of June 1945, though Gandhiji was released by the date of May 1944 because of the bad condition of his health. With this action being taken, most of the Muslim Union prohibited to go with Quit India movement and decided to work faithfully with Raj experts.